Alright guys, my name is the Meta Goblin, and today I'm going to be giving you my Warlock leveling guide for Classic World of Warcraft. As always, this video will cover a number of topics. First we'll have the FAQ section, mostly talking about pets. Then I'll go through the optimal talent build, and then I'll go through the rotation and playstyle. Then we'll run through the gear and stats section, and then I'll probably finish off talking a little bit about wand progression and money saving. And just before jumping guys, please do give me a quick follow on Twitch and on Discord. So the first big question people ask when it comes to leveling a Warlock is, what pet should I use? People are asking this question a lot more recently, especially as the Imp has become a more respectful option, due to its high damage. I would say both the Voidwalker and the Imp are viable options, and it depends on your personal experience of the game and your current environment. If you're new to the game, I'd recommend using the Voidwalker first until you become more familiar with the class, and then you might want to switch to an Imp and try it out. And if you're on a high populated PvP server, it might also be the better option to go for the Voidwalker to use its sacrifice ability to save your life in a PvP ganking kind of situation. And obviously in more difficult questing areas you will be expected to take down more than one enemy. The Voidwalker is going to be more useful and make that process easier for you. So it's your decision, really, but personally I would only recommend going for the Imp if you're a little bit more of an experienced player and you're looking for something a little bit different. So let's run through the talent section. There's a lot of debate in the Warlock community over the best talents, which means there are a number of different options available to you, and it's really down to your preference. For example, a lot of people like to go for the improved Drained Soul talent for the mana regeneration, but then other people argue that when they stack Spirit, the mana regeneration from Drained Soul isn't really that useful because you've just got enough mana regeneration anyway. It's also going to depend on what kind of build you're going to go for. You're going to go for the standard build, you're going to go for the Imp, the build with the when you're using the Imp for your pet, or you might go for a build where you're trying to multi-target, as often as possible. I'll talk about that more in the playstyle section. But anyway, I'm gonna, go through the build, talk about my preferences, talk about, all the different options available to you, but overall I'm gonna give you the most standard kind of leveling build that most people are probably gonna go for. So everyone has, their own personal preference of how they like to order their talents. I'm going to tell you my personal preference and my reason for them, but at the end of the day, if you've seen another guide with something slightly different that you prefer to go for, then just go for it. There are a number of key talents that I would really recommend. The whole philosophy of Warlock leveling is you get a little bit of demonology to begin with to get the improved Voidwalker, so you don't pull aggro with your Voidwalker, and then you just kind of spec into Affliction to increase your dot damage, and then you finish off in Demonology to just increase your pet damage slightly. So let me show you how I like to spec. I like to go for full out corruption, and then I'd like to go into Demonology a little bit early, right? You can pick whatever, for tier 1 in Demonology you can get the enhanced stamina, it's quite useful. I personally just prefer the utility of an improved health stone, very useful in PvP situations, and obviously I like having the improved Imp for when I'm in a dungeon group. So right now I have the improved Voidwalker available, but I'm not necessarily going to get it. Okay, I'm only going to get the improved Voidwalker when I start pulling aggro off the Voidwalker. So if I'm just, I'm in combat, I'm chain pulling mobs and leveling and, just going about my business, and then all of a sudden, I'm pulling aggro off my Voidwalker. And it's happening quite often now, it's happening quite consistently, out of 20 pulls I've pulled aggro of my Voidwalker about 5 times, so that's when I start to spec into improved Voidwalker. I don't just do it manually or, straight away, kind of blindly. I only spec into improved Voidwalker when I need it. When I feel like the Voidwalker is not holding aggro effectively enough, then I'll start putting points into it, and then I'll carry on specking into the Affliction tree. So from here, you spec into Affliction, you're pretty much going to have to max out suppression, especially if you're taking down higher level enemies. Then from here you have a number of options. From here a lot of people like to go for improved Drained Soul for the mana regeneration, and some people don't feel like it's necessary because they stack Spirit gear. That's up to you. I think if you're going for a really hardcore speed leveling playstyle, then the improved Drained Soul will probably be quite useful to you because you're going to be burning mana quite a lot, and you may want to get it even earlier than when I recommended to spec into Demonology. Then from here, improved Curse of Agony, just a little bit of extra damage, can't moan about that. A little bit of Grim Reach, so you can get into combat even earlier. Some people also like to get Amplified Curse. You can get it even earlier than this if you feel like it's necessary. It's very good for taking down enemies very quickly, particularly in 1v2 situations and when you're taking down quest enemies. From here I think the most useful talent is probably going to be improved life tap. The reason why I don't go for Nightfall is because in my experience the instant Shadow Bolt always seems to pull aggro, so I don't generally go for it, but the improved life tap is very effective. You can also go for that earlier than Grim Reach if you want to. Then from here you're going to get Siphon Life. You know, Siphon Life you can start implementing it into your rotation. We'll talk about it more in the rotation section, but it is a very useful ability. From here you've got two options. You can go for Fell Concentration, which is quite useful when you're taking down multiple enemies and you need to face tank an enemy. So just a little bit of extra survivability there. Some people like to prefer to go for Curse of Exhaustion instead, because you can kite enemies quite effectively with Curse of Exhaustion. It can save your life in a number of situations, particularly in PvP. So that's up to you. And obviously you max out Shadow Mastery because, you know, it's just flat out extra shadow damage. You cannot complain at it. So from here I like to max out Fell Intellect. You'll be surprised how much mana that your Void Walker consumes when he's using all his abilities, so that can come in quite useful, because you don't want him to run out of mana and then be unable to actually taunt, you know, because then you're going to pull aggro off your Void Walker. So there's that. And then you can go for Fell Domination if you want. Basically you just have a cooldown where you can quickly summon your pets, very useful in tight PvP situations. From here you can get more stamina, but like I prefer to just get 1 point into Fell Stamina every night. I just like to finish off the build into Unholy Power just to increase my damage of my Void Walker, because I feel like that's the most useful. But anyway, that is the talents for the Warlock. Let's move on to the rotation and playstyle section. Just one last thing before we move on, guys. It will have basically this build in the description, but also the alternative Imp talent build in the description as well. So the Warlock rotation is very similar to the Shaman rotation, because we will be front loading our damage dot abilities and then finishing off the enemy with a wand. So I'm going to give you two rotations. One rotation will be the lower level rotation before you can get your Void Walker. Then we'll have a higher level rotation, you know, post the point where you get your Void Walker. Then I'm going to finish off talking about the Imp high level playstyle and the more advanced multi-target playstyle, or the kind of like speed leveling playstyle that is available to you. So the low level rotation is pretty easy. You're basically going to use a bit of an aggro trick with your Imp. First of all, you send your Imp into combat, let him cast a Firebolt to pull aggro. Meanwhile you strafe to the left or right a few meters and then you cast your Shadow Bolt. The mob should bounce a bit between you and your Imp and get a little confused, which means the mob isn't going to be attacking you in the face, and which means overall you're going to take less damage and have to spend less time stopping to eat and get your, you know, your health back. You may want to start using your dots a little bit, but in my experience just spamming Shadow Bolt is fine, even if you have to hard cast, you know, with the mob basically attacking you. So let's start talking about a standard rotation you're going to be using most of the time while you're leveling. The rotation will focus on front loading your dots on the target and finishing it off with a wand. First of all you command your pet to attack, then you cast an Immolate while the pet is running towards the target. Then you pop a Curse of Agony. The reason why we use Curse of Agony earlier than Corruption is because the damage ramps up, so just something to bear in mind. Then you're going to use a Corruption, then you're going to basically stop casting all your abilities and start using your wand. And then if you have Drained Soul, use it on very low health, like ridiculously low health, because you want to be using the wand as much as possible. So I'd recommend putting health percentages on your unit frames so you can kind of see where the enemy is on really low health and then just kind of tap Drained Soul to get the benefit of the, you know, improved Drained Soul talent. You may want to start using Siphon Life. It's useful to top up your health if you know if you've used a few life taps, but in my experience it does tend to pull aggro sometimes, so you know, do be careful. You may want to throw in the odd Shadow Ball now and again if you have the mana for it, especially if you're taking down low level enemies because they die so fast. It's important to note that sometimes Immolate becomes very mana inefficient depending on what level you are, so always feel free to kind of feel the waters of your rotation and adapt to your situation by taking it out of your rotation if it's costing too much mana. I'm just going to very quickly explain your mana regeneration playstyle. What I'd always recommend you to do is use life tap over stopping to drink or drain mana or anything like that. Just life tap, even if it means you get to low health, and then bandage. And you can use your bandage while your pet's attacking, so you never really stop attacking. You can kind of just spam some life taps, use a bandage, maybe a Siphon Life or a Drain Life just to top up your health up a little bit, but be mindful that it will pull aggro. Well, has a chance to anyway. So that's kind of like the default strategy to get your mana back, is to kind of use your health as a resource rather than, you know, just stopping to drink. You can stop to drink, obviously, if you really need to, and if you're going to do it, always make sure your pet is, your pet doesn't need to stop and drink, so you may as well put your pet into combat while you stop to drink. So let's talk about the Imp playstyle. It's basically the same as a standard playstyle, but you're going to be kiting a lot more and body tanking more, which means bandages, Siphon Life and Demon Armor become very important components of the playstyle. You can also use a tactic similar to how hunter kiting strategy by, strafing between your wand attacks to prevent like a couple more melee hits before the enemy gets to you, into melee range. When it comes to multi-target situations, some Warlock speed levelers make taking down 2 to 3 enemies, at once the default playstyle, the default rotation, so they will always be taking down 2 mobs at once, which is very useful for getting quests done faster. Basically, you follow the same procedure as the standard rotation. You command your pet to attack the first target and you dot the first target up, and you just kind of leave the pet to finish him off while you dot up a second target. Okay, from here you can put the second target into a fear, but if it's not safe to do so because it might pull another enemy, or you just need to save on your mana, then you can just body tank the second enemy. But remember, if you're body tanking, like I mentioned before, Siphon Life, bandages and Demon Armor are quite essential. You may also want to consider using Drain Life, and if you've got Fell Concentration talent like I mentioned earlier, that's going to be even more useful to you if you're going to go for this like hardcore speed leveling playstyle where you're pulling as many things as you can and face tanking a lot more. I mean, some people, they get the pet on one target, they have put one target in a fear with the dots up, and then they body tank a third target. So some people play in a playstyle where they're basically near enough most of the time taking down 3 enemies at once. And if you imagine, that's basically 3 pulls, and you've probably completed a quest in 3 pulls. So you can kind of see why that is very beneficial to your, leveling time. So when it comes to gearing, you've got a number of options of what stats that you want to prioritize. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through every single stat and just kind of explain the advantages and disadvantages of each. So first of all, you've got Spirit. Like, most people are going to stack Spirit very high because it significantly reduces your downtime between enemies, chain pulling and all that kind of thing. So it massively increases your mana regeneration, and it's probably the most efficient stat that you can stack when you're leveling. Some people also like to go for Spell Power. The reason why they like to go to Spell Power, I've recommended this in previous guides, it scales with Life Tap, which means you get more mana back from Life Tap, and obviously you get increased dot damage, which means you kill enemies faster. The issue with Spell Power, though, in my experience, is that you simply just generate a little bit too much aggro because of the increased spell damage, so that is something to bear in mind. So the next 2 stats are Stamina and Intellect. I'd recommend stacking enough Stamina just to get around about an extra Life Tap, because you don't want to be spamming Life Tap and then just end up with no health, because that can, you can get into a risky situation pretty quickly with that. So I'd recommend stacking enough Stamina just for that increased survivability and that increased Life Tap. But when it comes to Intellect, I find Intellect to be a very useless stat. The reason why is because when you're leveling, you're going to spend a large amount of your time out of combat, which means you're going to benefit from your mana regeneration, your maximum mana regeneration and your Spirit stat. So, which means you're probably not going to be draining your mana that far down, and even if you do, you can use your Spirit stack to regenerate it. If you think about it, like, Intellect is useful for very long fights where you can't regenerate your mana. If you're doing a raid, you're taking down a raid boss, you can't regenerate your mana, naturally with your gear. The only way to do it as a Warlock or a DPS class in general is to do it with a mana potion. So that's the only situation where Intellect becomes very useful, is in a long raid fight, whereas leveling, it's just much less useful. You will have to stack enough Intellect to get a decent mana pool, but it's not a huge priority. And you are going to find Intellect pieces, because you're going to find it on your Spirit gear, so it's just going to be there and it's going to be useful, but it's not a stat that you need to prioritize over other stats. It's not going to increase your spell power like it does on retail. It just increases your chance to crit with spells, which it's going to be pretty difficult to stack that high enough to make a significant difference when you're leveling up. Anyway, let's round this off. My start priority would be Spirit, then Stamina, and then Intellect. And then if you're playing with an Imp, then you would probably want to use Spell Power, Spirit, and then Stamina. So let's go through one progression, guys. Basically, I've already got a Google Drive document, ready to go, which basically tells you the best ones that are available to you. The list kind of prioritizes quest rewards rather than dungeon rewards, because I know that loot that drops from dungeons isn't like a guaranteed drop chance, and obviously farming a dungeon over and over again is, you know, going to be a bit of a time waste. So just prioritize quest rewards and potential auction house purchases that you can get as well. And that's pretty much it. You know, that's in the description of the video. I like to finish my guides talking a little bit about money saving, but as for the Warlock, you don't really need to save for a mount at level 40 because you get a cheaper alternative. But nonetheless, I would recommend saving money a little bit. I do have a video for that as well. It's basically how to get your mount at level 40, but you can kind of apply those strategies to you even though you're not saving for the mount. And what I'd recommend is saving money, basically, you know, so that when you finally get to level 60, you can have a bit of a pool of money. And I recommend prioritizing that money on speed leveling your professions, because getting your best in slot, or pre-read best in slot gear with your tailoring is going to be quite useful to you. Or if you want to straight away, you know, power level engineering, that's going to be extremely useful in both PvE and PvP environments. So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm going to end the video, guys. My name is Metagoblin. Until my next video, ciao.